Anarchapulco, Mexico. This is Anarchast.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I'm super excited to have back on a person I greatly admire, the great Dr. Ron Paul, one of the greatest freedom fighters in my generation, in our generation, and so happy to have him back on the show, and also to announce that he'll be coming to Anarchapulco next month on February 15th to 18th in Acapulco, Mexico. Super excited to have him down here. Great to have you on, sir. Good to see you again. I hope you had a good New Year. I wanted to get your impression, first of all, on we're entering into the first end of the first year of the Donald Trump era. I just wanted to get your impression of how that's been going.
Oh, well, that's a long story. Hectic, I would say. It was a hectic year. And, you know, we do a daily program, almost daily program on the internet, the Liberty Report. And we talk a lot about Trump and foreign affairs especially. And we have a challenge to figure out exactly what his positions are, you know. But when thinking about foreign policy and what the administration is doing, coming from our position of non-intervention, where we don't like our government and our militaries all over the world, he's all over the place, and we've been disappointed, of course, with Trump's foreign policy because he changes his tune too often, and sometimes he, changes in a negative way, like on the Iranians. That's a horrible position. But then he had a good position on Russia, and now it's gotten much worse. So I think the best way is for me to describe what's been going on, whether it's foreign policy or whatever. It's very hectic. I mean, it's amazing. I don't have a lot of super exciting things to say about Trump. But then when I think of his real opposition, you know, the political opposition who would like to murder him, or and I say that, cautiously, they would like to, destroy him politically and impeach him and do all these kind of things. You know, it's a mixed bag. But it goes with my position that politics, is not exactly the place to change people's views or change the world. And even though I was in politics for a long time, my goal was a little bit different than the average person that went to Washington. And so changing people's minds and attitudes and changing monetary policy and trying to get the government very, very small, that's a different job than what they do in Washington, because to get to Washington and have a presence there, you have to play the game. Right now, though, the way I see it, the whole thing's falling apart, and even that doesn't work so well. And I think the simplest way to explain that is the country's bankrupt. They won't admit it. And the idea is they're bankrupt and the money's gone. And then they're just fighting over managing something that's drifting rapidly into a bankrupt stage. And even though the stock market's high, I think the economy is in very, very dangerous territory.
Absolutely. We'll get into that a little bit. But before we do that, I want to just ask you a little bit further on Trump, because before he was elected, he said that he was going to stop a lot of these wars. He was not going to get entangled in Syria and all these sort of things. And he really hasn't. He's sort of done the exact opposite of most of the things he said. So my question is, do you think the president really has much control of those things? Did he lie to get in, or did he actually believe that, but once he got in, he couldn't actually change what was going on?
Well, somebody was suggesting yesterday from that new book that came out that he didn't think he'd win. It was an accident because he didn't have any opinions about all those things. I don't quite buy into that. But he doesn't have a precise philosophy. For those of us who believe in a libertarian philosophy, it's very precise. We know what non-aggression is, and we know what sound money is, and all these kind of things. I don't think he has that. I think he's impressed with the last person he talked to, and he doesn't have much of an interest. They say he's not a person that reads books and studies. I imagine he doesn't really understand Austrian economics, and if he did, he probably wouldn't care about it. And yet he had a personality and a determination. He ended up making a lot of money, but maybe that tells you something about the system too, because in spite of the fact that he was going to clean the swamp, the whole thing is that he was part of that system. He bragged about it. You know, I did this, and I had to give the Democrats. How else could I get my programs done? How could I get the permits done? You know, and all this stuff. So it's rather ironic that he personally was very much a part of that system that he was out to destroy. and now the people are pretty confused about it. And I think it's going to get more confusing. And I think the Democrats are really, really hateful enough that I think this year is going to be a very hectic year for Trump. And I think Trump's foreign policy is atrocious. He's been in so many different countries. He has not backed off. So and I think your one question was, is he doing this on his own, or is he controlled by the neocons? Philosophically, he's controlled by the neocons. How he got there, I don't know. It's hard for me to believe that they call him up and say, all right, Trump, this is what you have to do today. I don't think it works quite that way, but the position's changed. But I don't think that should surprise us all, because whether you have Republicans or Democrats in charge, the policies don't change. We stay involved overseas. We stay in support of the Federal Reserve. We stay in support of the welfare system. And we stay in support of the Keynesian theory that deficits don't matter. And so Trump is really no different. His personality is different. But Republican or Democrat, the country marches on. But my thesis right now is it's in a period of time. It's ending, and I'm claiming that the ending was very apparent with the beginning of last recession, 10 years ago, because we really never recovered. And that's why, something's going to have to be done. I think there's going to be a revamping. It's a matter of who's going to get the remaining amount of loot that's left and who's going to get blamed. But I just don't think this system is going to continue this way, because you just can't create wealth out of thin air. And we've had the privilege of creating the wealth out of thin air because we had the reserve currency. And I think that's ending. And I think that's the big issue that's coming, is the destruction of the dollar. And we know now that this past year was not real good for the dollar.
Yeah, absolutely. It was its worst year since 2003. And you brought up how Donald Trump is basically part of the swamp. He's made a lot of his money from the swamp. You pointed out how he bragged on camera in the debates. I don't know if you were on stage. No, you weren't this year, but that he's like, I paid you off, I bribed you, and no one seemed to really even care all that much about all this. But and also he made a lot of his fortune through a lot of sort of debt and sort of bankruptcy. And of course, bankruptcy is all part of the state corporation system, and then a lot of this debt is all possible through the financial system, which is all Federal Reserve, fiat currencies, fractional reserve. So in many ways, he's a total product of this system. So the fact that a lot of people think he's coming in to destroy the system, if he is, he's going to destroy a lot of what he's built to himself in the process. And he's shown from his what he's done, because he talked quite negatively about the Federal Reserve before. He also talked negatively about Hillary Clinton. And then as soon as he got in, he said Hillary Clinton's a good friend of mine, which of course she is. And then he said that the Federal Reserve is fine. He's just put in another Federal Reserve chairman who has no change at all to what Janet Yellen or Ben Bernanke or really Alan Greenspan has been doing, has it?
Yeah, now, even if he gave him the benefit of the doubt, which I would have trouble doing that, and saying that he didn't work any deals behind the scenes and manipulate the politician, but if you just said that he operated in the system, which a lot of people do, in an honest way, the system is designed to help the people who have access to credit. So this is the reason that wealthy people get wealthier, because they get the money when it still is more valuable. By the time it circulates and real wages go down and real prices go up, no matter what they claim the statistics are, this is why you wipe out half of the population or more. And I think that's one of the social factors that's going to be ripping the country apart, if it hasn't already started, is the fact that the inequity is not because of capitalism, it's because of this crony capitalism and because of the monetary system, that there's a lot of people who suffer, and yet what happens to it is that Bernie Sanders come along and say, see, we told you capitalism was horrible. And we, as freedom people and sound money people, we have a job to convince the people that, the enemy is not free markets and sound money. The enemy really is a system which is interventionism, a planned economy, and Federal Reserve manipulation, which breeds all these special interests. And of course, on both sides, there's welfare for the rich and welfare for the poor, and there's a dwindling middle class. And that's why I do not believe these optimistic statistics are going to be very permanent, and there's a little bit of euphoria there. I think there's a big bubble out there, and there will be some corrections, and that's what we can't predict when. We can predict that they're out there, and there are distortions, but I think there are distortions in like stocks and bonds and cryptocurrencies and on and on. You know, there's just a lot of money out there. On the short run, it looks like things are going well, but corrections are coming, and you don't know where all the malinvestment is. We've seen it in the NASDAQ bubble, we've seen it in the housing bubble, but I think this one's going to be bigger because I think everything over many, many years have been distorted, mainly because the big problem with a system like this is the rigging of prices. Oh yeah, well, we don't have wage and price controls. Not exactly. We have a lot of interference, but we have one price control which is devastating to an economy, and that's the price of interest. You know, the interest rate. And when it goes to zero, it makes it cheap. It sounds like, oh, healthy economy, people are saving money. So when you interfere with the interest rates, which should be the most important signal for savers and investors and entrepreneurs and all this, it's been absent for a long time. Well, really absent for 10 years. That's why I think everything is in a bubble.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. That's what we talk about at the Dollar Vigilante, which I work on all the time. I have one question that was asked by a viewer of ours to ask you, and the question is, after a quarter century in government, do you think it is a viable mechanism for civilization?
Well, we always have to have government. I think the best government is self-government, and that's the most important thing. And then family government and community government, and if you have religious values, religious government. So, which means that it's a voluntary society, and I think that is best. The problem is, of course, government's been with us for as long as mankind's been around. It seems like there is a determination that you have to have people lose confidence in themselves, and they think somebody in government can take care of them. So they've been tempted to do that. So if we're not going to get rid of government in the near future, then we have to say, well, can we define the role of government? And the founders tried to. They started off all right until the Constitutional Convention. Then it was sort of downhill after that. But if you have a government, and we could precisely say the only important purpose of the government is to protect the right of people to be their own government, as long as they don't hurt people. And that would cancel out a lot of things. It would change the foreign policy. It would change the monetary policy, the spending, the taxing policy, no IRS. There'd be so much of change, and it wouldn't be difficult. So, yes, I think self-government is the best. But if you're going to have government, it should be, the goal should be to limit it to that of protecting our right to self-govern, and also accept the principle that governments can't ever protect us from ourselves, and that if there are risks to be taken, which there always will be, that you don't want the government protecting us against risk, because the big risk is the government being involved in such antics. And of course, all you have to do is look at the government's supposed to protect our privacy, Fourth Amendment. But what do? They protect the secrecy of government. So it's been turned on its head. So this whole idea of there's such a thing, that there's a belief among many of us that minding our own business and taking care of ourselves is risky, because sometimes we screw up and cause harm. But that's what would happen if we live in a free society. But as far as I'm concerned, it's a lot better than turning the decision-making over to a few people who get into government and make all those decisions for everybody. So, yeah. Yes, perfect liberty is not perfect in the sense that everything doesn't work out exactly as you would like, but the most amount of liberty that you can have will reduce the amount of problems and create the greatest amount of prosperity. I'm convinced of that. The freer a society, the more prosperous it is, and the more creative it is. But unfortunately, the system we've had, especially for the last 100 years, because of wealth that has been created, we've had a lot of wealth. The people became dependent, and they have forgotten about how wealth is created, and that's why we're facing the crisis.
Yeah, I totally agree with your views on prosperity. The more freedom, the more prosperity there is. And of course, you just mentioned that you're a big fan of self-government. You think that's the kind of government we should have, and that you were known as Dr. No, where you said no to virtually all acts of aggression by the government in your time in Congress. And you've even been quoted, I think you're on C-SPAN, where you said anarchy is a great idea. So I know we don't have you for very long. We only have a minute or so left. But I just want to ask your views on anarchy as a whole. Would you even consider yourself as at least a philosophical anarchist? Because by all of your actions, you basically have been doing that by trying to reduce government as much as possible, by believing in self-government.
I think if you believe in self-government, it's a form of anarchy. But my position is that what are the odds? I mean, we can barely reduce the size of government. Government grows, exponentially, constantly. But I do think that the ideas have to be changed. People have to believe that they're going to be better off with anarchy. And then that's the job that we have. Yes, we should work in that direction. But I don't think that we're at a position where, if we could just go to Washington and blow it up tomorrow, everything is going to be fine. There's somebody else is going to be wanting the government. It'll be used for a bigger government, a more authoritarian government. The people are rebelling because they don't have enough freedom, and then they get cracked down and they get even less. So, but I think it's ideological. I don't think it's political. I never was much into politics, and I still do my best to promote the ideas and the principles. I think it should be a moral principle. We have a right to our life and our liberty, and we have a right to use that liberty. And I always argue that liberty brings people together. You can do different things. You can have your personal life, your religious life, your sexual life, your property rights on what you all do. Everybody should bring progressives together who have different lifestyles and for different reasons. That's why liberty should be so attractive. So people who don't like, I tend to have a conservative lifestyle. If people think, oh, that's terrible, well, you have to be tolerant enough to let people use their liberties they see fit with one rule. Don't mess with somebody else's liberty. You don't force people to do anything that they don't want to do, but you don't have to roll over if they're using force against you. You have a right to defend yourself.
That's right. Just one rule, the non-aggression principle. Thank you very much, Dr. Paul. Really looking forward to you coming down to Anarchapulco. I think you're going to see, we have over 1,000 people coming, and many of the speakers are really trying to change these sort of systems. As you pointed out, we can't just blow up the government. They're just going to build another one. We have to change the minds of people, and we have to create the new systems that make the old systems obsolete and just make people say, oh, I'd rather just use, say, Bitcoin or cryptocurrency than the Federal Reserve note. It's just better in this way or that way, and in that way we can get rid of and just make the government obsolete. So I want to give you a second here if you do want to mention anything about the Ron Paul Liberty Report or anything else you're doing to let our viewers know.
Yes, that's what I spend most of my time on right now, along with the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. And along with that, we do a program, the Ron Paul Liberty Report, which can be found. We live stream at noon Eastern time, and our audience continues to grow. We have to deal a little bit with monetizing those programs with Facebook and Google. And I think that is a challenge because I see them as an arm of big government, and they at times would like to, if they don't already, dampen, our audience. But it still is a vehicle. The internet has served us well, and I just hope that the people who are a lot smarter about the internet programming and all than I am will always be able to get around government maneuvering and regulations of the internet. And I think the technology, just from my estimation, has to be big enough where you can circumvent the government in order to get this message out. And that will make the big difference. There's a big difference between what I was trying to do in the 1950s and 60s, trying to find the information and try to find out the truth of things. Now, in spite of some shortcomings on the internet, it's pretty neat how quickly you can get the information you want, as long as you're willing to sort it out and not believe everything you read on the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how you did it before the internet. It's so much easier now to find that information. But as you pointed out, they are trying to censor it as much as possible. But that's what a lot of the people who are coming to Anarchapulco are doing, is trying to find ways to decentralize the internet, decentralize currencies, decentralize basically everything to give the power back to the people. So thank you once again. A real true pleasure. Dr. Ron Paul, who will be at Anarchapulco February 15th, 18th coming up. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, share down below. And that's it for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.
Thank you.
In a world where Antifa riots in the city streets, cops rage out of control, and the leader of the free world is a fat-ass casino owner, one event stands alone to make anarchy great again.
I actually love humanity. That is why I'm an anarchist.
Backwards in the building like we the ceiling, we illin'. No matter who find it appealing, I'm here and I got a feeling that we'll be dealing a lot of pain with a penicillin get drilled in your head. That we are monsters and yeah, we come from the slums and for months we've been pumped, but for once I am now comfortable. I want to grow, I want some more success, and I want to know that greatness can't be rushed, can't be lost, so face the bus. Feel free to hate on us, we lace them up. Dudes, we done paid them up. Keep snakes away from us and safe from us, you might wanna be. Remember when clowns used to make fun of me and that they wanna be me, see me and they run at me. I'm gonna be the greatest, yeah I wanna be, but I am not the one to be the fakest for the sake of being played. I'm here, like I never left, said so hell, nah, cause I can't just fail, so just prepare your ears, it'll get for real. Take from here, we will never take the cell, it's grind time. My mind and my thoughts, my highs and my faults, my wins and my loss, when will I fall off? It's a test for me, you are now listening to Veracity. Yeah.
Fuck the media, fuck the banks, fuck drone strikes, fuck tanks, fuck hunger, fuck war, fuck ignoring of the poor, fuck the left, fuck the right, fuck the government. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.